Hello everyone. This is a very simple tutorial where we are going to discuss about EC2 instances, if not the virtual machines in AWS cloud. Today, we are going to discuss how an AWS virtual machine can be created, if not an EC2 instance can be created. And secondly, we are going to discuss how the access to such an instance can be provided to a new user via SSH as the format. And lastly, we are going to discuss a few common errors, if not issues, that we will get to troubleshoot when we are granting access to new users. I hope you will enjoy this and this will be helpful. Let's get on to this one. Before we start, let's understand what will be the workflow. More importantly, those who are looking for specific points, if specific content, the timeline related to each of these sections can be found in the description section of the video. So first of all, I will be demonstrating how an EC2 instance can be created in the AWS cloud environment. Second of all, I will be demonstrating how a Windows user can log into that created EC2 instance using PuTTY. As the third step, I will be creating how a new user can be created so that user will be also be able to access this created EC2 instance. This is a very common real life scenario. Imagine you are working as a senior engineer and there is a new junior cloud engineer who needs access to an existing EC2 instance. You will be creating a user account where SSH key will be used, right? So this is what we are going to demonstrate today. And lastly, we are going to discuss about a very common couple of errors that most of the people experience when they have created new users to EC2 instances. Most of the users come up with these errors. How to fix those and why those are occurring, we will be discussing at the fourth step. I hope you'll enjoy it. All right, now I have logged into my AWS Cloud Console. This is where generally the management happens. Without wasting time, I'll very quickly demo how an EC2 instance can be created. All you have to do is simply click on this EC2 instance, like on the option, that will take you to the page where you can create an EC2 instance. This video is more focused towards the key pair usage and some errors and issues that we often experience, so I'll not be emphasizing a lot on the creation of the EC2 instance. So by clicking on the launch instance option, you can very quickly launch an EC2 instance. I'll give it a name. I'll name it as web server. You can give a name that you like. The operating system of the EC2 instance, I'll be using it as Amazon Linux because it is free. T2 Micro, this version is free. Now this is the most important part of this entire video. This particular EC2 instance will require a key pair, as SSH key pair. If you already have key pairs that you have created, you can use one of it. But for the purpose of this video, I will be creating a new key pair. You can provide a name that you like, and you can download the PEM file, if not the PEM file. You can save it. In my case, I'll save it into one of my folders. Right. It is really important to understand this key must remain in a confidential and a secure place, and you should not share it with anyone. For the video's simplicity, I'll keep everything else as default, and I will create the instance. With that, we will be able to create the instance like that. If you go to the instances section, you will be able to see your instances. This is actually a one that I already have. This one here is what I just created a few seconds ago. As you can see, the instance state appears as pending. It will become running in a few seconds time. In the next section of this video, I will be demonstrating how a Windows user can log into this EC2 instance using the key pair that we downloaded a few minutes ago. All right. So let's understand what we are trying to achieve now. So we have a key pair and we have a web server which is running. We are going to understand using that key pair, that SSH key pair, how we are going to access this particular web server. So first of all, we will need PuTTY-Gen. That is a small application that you can directly download. It looks like this. I am currently running that application, which is already installed in this machine. You can easily download it by going into PuTTY load. Let's go into putty.org. From here, you can download the actual version of PuTTY. So first of all, I have PuTTY-Gen, and I'm going to convert the key pair into a private key. How am I doing that? Is the key one of the key points that you have to understand. You have to load the key pair which was saved a few minutes ago. This is the key pair. You have to make sure that you select it to all files here, otherwise the file will not appear here because it is saved as a PEM file. And once you load it, file has been properly loaded. So we can keep it there, and then we can click on save. This is about an additional layer of security where the key can be guarded, if not secured, with an additional passphrase. In this case, for the simplicity, I will not be providing another passphrase. I will be directly going ahead without a passphrase. And with that, I can save the private key. I will save it like that. Once the private key is saved and extracted from the key pair, the next tool we will require is actual PuTTY. PuTTY can be used to log into your EC2 instance, the web server that we created a few minutes ago in the same video. This is how you can use PuTTY in Windows with the SSH key in order to log into an instance, EC2 instance. First thing that you have to do is you have to go to the SSH section of it, expand it, go to the auth section, browse for the key, go to the correct location where you saved, if not you extracted and saved the private key, open it using PuTTY. Once that's done, you have to go to the session section and you have to provide the host name and the IP address and make sure the port is 22. When you select SSH, that will be automatically updated. What is the IP address of your host? That can easily be extracted from by going to the AWS console. If you select your instance, you will be able to see certain details here. One of the information is basically the public IP address and the private IP address. You cannot use private IP address to access this one because it is not routable through internet, it is not reachable through internet. That's why we have to copy the public IP address. You have to copy it, take it here, and then there is a little bit of an addition you have to do. You have to provide the username. The default username for any instance, any EC2 instance created will go as EC2 user. Keep in mind, this will be if you have used AWS Linux as the operating system for the instance that you created. If you can remember, in this video for this instance, we used if not the AWS Linux as the operating system. Therefore, the username will be EC2-user, and you have to provide with an @ followed by the IP address, public IP address. Now the key has been loaded, a converted, extracted private key has been loaded, and the username and the host name has been provided. Now you have to click on open. Once that's done, it will force us to accept the key, and with that we will be able to log into the EC2 instance. Now few things that you have to understand, important points. How did this all work? It is important to understand a key pair means there are two keys. There is a private key, there is a public key. When you are trying to log into an instance like this, a machine like this using the private key, the public key should be already within this instance, within this machine. So by default, when you were creating this instance, it asked you to use a key pair where we created this new key pair. The public key of it has already been stored within this instance. You have the private key. When you log into it, you provide it. So what the machine does it, they compare the public key with the private key. If the comparison comes up with a matching output, if it matches, then you will be allowed to log into the system. That is what basically happens. So you have to make sure that you use the proper default private key pair and it matches with the existing public key. To show you how it all works, I'll take you through to a little bit of an inside of this machine. Let me list down the home directories of this machine. As you can see, there is an EC2 user home directory already. This is the default folder of the EC2 user. This is where the public key already exists. We don't have any other users. That is why we can see only a one user folder, home directory for one user. That is how this entire thing basically worked. I hope it is clear. Now we have successfully logged into the EC2 instance, so you can perform your day-to-day activities like this using the default key. In the next section of the video, we will be creating a new user. Just like I previously explained, imagine a junior engineer joining your organization and this being one of the bastion servers where access should be, if not access to other resources, is maintained. So that junior engineer will require access to this bastion server. How are you going to provide that? The most secure method is providing access through an EC2 instance, sorry, the SSH key. So we will be demonstrating how that can be done. Alright, so the next section of this video is all about adding a new user with SSH access to this EC2 instance. A practical use case will be, as I previously explained, having a one instance, one web server, maybe one bastion server, and at the workplace there is a new engineer who joins the team who will require access to this server. It's a practical common use case. How do you add such a user? How do you provide access to this EC2 instance to another user is what we are going to discuss. Before we actually discuss that, there are a few points that you have to understand from what we did up to this point. First of all, when we created the EC2 instance in the demonstration, it came with a default user count. We called it EC2 user. That user had a home directory. I already showed you. When an EC2 instance is created, a key pair was also generated. I showed you how a key pair was generated during we were creating the EC2 instance and how we saved it, how we converted it to a private key. I showed you all of those. Now the fourth important point is that key pair was used by the default EC2 user. That is the connection between that key pair and the actual default EC2 user. Now the home directory of the EC2 user, it has the public key of that particular key pair. So the private key, we used it in the previous section of this video. Using that private key, using the EC2 user's username, we logged into this machine. So in simple words, what we did was we used the default user count EC2 user and the private key of EC2 user to log into the account. Now when you understand that, it gives you the required background knowledge to assume what is required to create another user. So when you are creating another user, there are few things that you will have to complete which aligns with same what happened with the EC2 user as well. With that knowledge, let's go into understand what are the requirements to create a new user. So going along with the previously understood concept about the key and its connection with the default EC2 user, When you are creating a new user, it is the same concept that has to be applied. First thing what's required when you are creating a new user is a key pair. Once a key pair is available, you need a home directory for that particular user in the EC2 machine where you are going to provide access to that particular new user. Once the key pair and the home directory both are available, then what we should do is we should place the public key in the home directory of that particular user and share the private key with that particular user so he can use that private key to log into the EC2 instance. Once he attempted that, the private key he provided will be matched with his public key in his home directory. If it matches, he will be allowed to access to this EC2 instance. So I'm going to demonstrate this in the next section practically by creating a new user. So before I start the practical demonstration, I'll explain you a scenario so that will be a easy to understand kind of a method to grasp this concept. Let's imagine that Bob is a new engineer. Bob has joined last week and there is a web server of the company ABC, and Bob's supervisor is about to provide access to that EC2 server so Bob can access it. Now the following section of this video will demonstrate how that happens. Alright, let's assume that I am Bob's supervisor, and Bob is a new engineer, as I explained, who needs access to our web server so he can manage it. Now it's my responsibility to grant him access so he can actually do his job. So I'm going to go to the instances section. I can see our web server is there, and first option, as we explained in the previous part, is to provide, if not create, a key pair for Bob. How can I do that? In the EC2 section, if I scroll down, there is an option called key pairs. Here I am creating a key pair for Bob. Here I am using it the PPK format, so I don't have to do any conversions in PuTTY when I'm using PuTTY. I'm using this version, this format for the key. I'll save it, so I can save this. Generally, in a real life scenario, we will be sharing this key with Bob so he can use it with PuTTY when he's logging into the web server. Now the key pair is there. Now the second thing in the list, in the previously explained list, is to create a home directory for Bob. Now to create a home directory in the existing web server, we have to access it. Now we don't have any other accounts to access it. The only account we have to access it is the default EC2 user account. Now I have already logged into the EC2 account, if you can remember from the previous section of the video. Now what I am going to do is I am going to create a home directory for Bob. Before I do that, let me adjust this so you can see it properly. I'll make it maybe 14. Yes, now it's pretty visible. Let's understand who are the existing users. Now take a guess, it should be only EC2 user, right? So how am I going to check that? I will check it as ls home. As you can see, we have only a one home directory for the EC2 user, the only user who has access to this EC2 instance. So what I should do is I should add the new user to this instance, so he will have a home directory. How am I going to do that? I have a command. I will be including these commands in the description of this video. I will type it as sudo adduser. I will type the name of the user. So now it's created. Now let's see whether Bob has a home directory. Now there is a new home directory for Bob, as you can see. Okay. What's next? Next is, before we proceed further, we have to switch to Bob's role in this instance. So everything that we do from this point onwards can be actually come to effect. How am I switching the role from current role? Currently, who am I? I am EC2 user. I want to be Bob. How am I going to do that?
I am typing the command sudo su minus bob. Now, as you can see, the prompt changed to be Bob. It is no longer EC2 user. Who am I? I am Bob. Right. Now from this point onwards, I can perform all the other rest of the steps. Now keep in mind again, I'm just reminding, we have the home directory created. Now what we should do is, we should have the public key of Bob included in this folder. How am I going to do that? I should have a directory, if not another subfolder in this home folder to store the public key of Bob. To do that, I am going to create a directory. I am going to name it .ssh. It is a standard, you have to name it as .ssh. Okay, now I have a subfolder called .ssh. Now what I am going to do is, I am going to change the permission of this .ssh folder so only Bob can view it and edit it. Why? It is because others should not have access to this folder, because that is where he has his public key and critical private certain confidential information. How am I going to change the permission? Chmod 700.ssh. Once you issue this permission for this folder will be properly edited. That is also done. Once that's done, we should go inside this SSH folder. How are we going inside to this folder? That is by cd.ssh. Now, where am I? If I want to check where am I have to type pwd. It will show that I am in Bob's home directory and I am inside the .ssh folder. And if I find out who am I am Bob. Okay, now we are good. What we should do next is, we should create a file to store the public key. How am I creating a file in Linux? That is by using the touch command. And the name of the file is a standard. This is where we will be keeping the public key. It should be authorized keys. This is the name of the file. I am creating it. Now I have created a file as well. Before we proceed further, we should secure this file as well. We should secure the permission, if not adjust the permission so no one else will be able to see it or view it. How do we do that? Chmod 600 authorized _ keys. Okay, so now the file is also secured. Okay, perfect. Now what we should do is, we should go inside the file, inside authorized keys files. Imagine opening up a notepad file in a graphical user interface of a Windows machine. Same concept. Here we have a file called authorized keys, a notepad file. We are opening it using the command nano authorized keys. Perfect. Now we have our authorized keys file open, but it's empty. It has nothing in it. So what we should do now is, we should paste the public key of Bob in this folder. How am I going to generate the public key? The same concept apply here. What I would do is, I would load Bob's key pair using putty keygen, and once that's loaded, you will see his public key in here in this section. What you should do is, you should copy this, make sure you entirely take a copy of it, and then paste it, and once pasted, press Ctrl+X on the keyboard. It will ask whether you want to save the changes. Press key Y, and it then asks whether the authorized keys is the name. Then we confirm that as well. So with that, the public key now has been saved in the authorized keys file. If I want to double check whether it happened, I can open that file and I can have a look at that file. I would type cat authorized keys, and it will show me my public key. Not mine, but Bob's public key. Okay, now we have done what's required. What's required is creating a home directory for Bob, and then placing Bob's private key in here as well. And now Bob should be able to log into this instance. How can Bob log into this instance? Bob will also use putty. So let's demonstrate Bob's job, but what Bob will do. What Bob will do is, Bob will need the instance, the IP address of the instance. We copied that, we pasted it here. From the previous knowledge, we know that prior to the IP address, we should include the name, the username. So Bob is the username, Bob at the IP address. And then we go to the SSH section, go to the auth section, we browse for Bob's private key, and we open it, and we open it. Now what will happen is, it will successfully take us to the instance. We have logged into the same web server EC2 instance, but this time we are not EC2 user, we are actually Bob. Let me change the appearance here so you can see it. I'll change it to 16. Okay. So as you can see, who am I? I am Bob. This is how Bob should be able to log into a corporate EC2 instance securely. This is how. This is one of the simpler methods most of the small scale and medium scale companies use to grant access to their users. There are many other methods as well, but this is the most simplest, and if not the simplest, and one of the most secure methods. In the next section, we will be focusing on a few errors that often comes up, and how we can solve those, and how we can get those fixed, basically. Alright, if you can remember, we previously shared the key pair with Bob. From that, he actually used putty keygen to find out his public key. You can remember, I copied it like this from this section, and I pasted it in the authorized key file in the EC2 instance. That's what I did. Now, a common error that many of the users would do is something like this. Let me first get this public key. I'll paste it into a notepad file so you can see it. A very common error that people would do when generating the key is, like Bob, he would load the key pair and he would save the public key. This method is correct, but there is a small problem. Let me save it as pub, and I'll show that to you. I'll open this public key file. I'll open it with the notepad, and now I'm just taking this, I'm copying this one, and I'm pasting it to the previous notepad file. Now this is the key that I actually entered into the EC2 instance, and this is the public key that I saved from putty. Now as you can see, it's the same key. There's no difference. It's the same key. The main difference here is there are three differences. First of all, When you save the public key using PuTTY, it adds this clutter. This content is not required. And it is missing this SSH-RSA in the beginning. That's the first difference. Second difference is at the end, there is an additional clutter, which is not in here. And the third difference is it adds the username Bob. In this format, it is not there. Now, what will happen is if you copy this as the public key, and let's go to the EC2 instance, the session. Here we go. Okay, I am going to switch to Bob's role. I will go to sudo su-bob and I'll go to cd.ssh, and this is where my authorized key file is there, and I'm going to open the authorized keys file. Okay, this is where I have the key. I'll remove this key. I'll remove the correct key, and let's paste the other format which was generated by PuTTY. Okay, that is the correct format, but I will get the incorrect format with a lot of clutter in the front and at the tail, and the username is also missing, and I'll paste that, but the key is same. That's the key point here, and I'll save it. I'll save it and save the same username. Now I will try to create a new session and try to log in as Bob. So I need the IP address. I will give Bob at new address, and I'll log into SSH auth, and I'll include the private key, and if I open it, as you can see, this is one reason why this error gets generated. This is one of the core reasons why this error gets generated. So the takeaway point here is, whenever you are loading the key pair and whenever you are extracting the public key, always copy it from here. It includes the right format of the public key. AWS specifically advises in their documentations for the public key to be in a one line rather than being this type of broken into multiple lines. That is one problem, and these content and missing SSH-RSA at the same time the username, such points actually causes this problem. So when you are including the public key, make sure you copy it from here. Another common reason for this error is when you are using a different username. Now, how does the username get determined? That is from the home directory that you created. If you can remember, I'll play the role of the EC2 user. If I list down home directories, I created a user called Bob. The home directory name is the username of the user. I'll demonstrate what will happen if I let me first correct the private key. So that should work first. I'll switch the role. I'll switch it to Bob's role, that is sudo su-bob. Okay, who am I? I am Bob. I'll cd to the .ssh folder. I'll nano authorized keys file, and I'll delete this entire incorrect key, and I can paste the correct key and fix the problem. Okay, now I'll come back here to the keygen, and I'll the correct format of the key. and I'll paste it here. As you can see, it got pasted as a one line, which is important here. And now that's done. Let's try logging in as Bob to a new session. This should work with no issues. I'll load the key, Bob's key. If I open it, it works with no issues. I was trying to explain a second scenario, but before I explain the second scenario, I wanted to correct the previous error. That's why I corrected the key. The second scenario is, I explained you the home directory's name is the username. If someone by any chance use a different username, let's say instead of Bob he types Bob N. Let's say N is his the first letter of the surname. With a wrong understanding, Bob includes like that, and he types the IP address and he loads the correct key. Now understand, he loads the correct key and he has the correct public key and he tries to log in. The only error that he did was actually used an incorrect username. So that is also a problem which could cause this same error. So this error can caused by that problem as well. So when you experience this error, try and make sure that username, if not the home directory name and the username are the same. Secondly, make sure the format of the public key is correct and it is pasted properly. If you do that, that should fix this problem. I really hope that you learned something from this video. This was an error that I experienced and I struggled a lot. Hope this knowledge helps someone else to overcome that very easily. Thank you for watching.